When people hear the word missions, as in church missions, they usually think of traveling overseas. But what if I told you one of the greatest mission fields is already in your community? It's families affected by disability. It's deaf individuals, people with autism, adults with intellectual disabilities. It's parents who have stopped attending church because no one knows how to support their child. It's volunteers who wanted to help but never received training. As someone who is hard of hearing and has volunteered in a church special needs ministry for literal years, I've seen something incredible. I've seen churches change lives, but I've also seen churches unintentionally make people feel like they don't belong. Today, I want to answer one simple question. Why does every church need a disability ministry? And no, I'm not saying every church needs a huge budget, or a massive special needs wing, or dozens of paid staff. That's not practical. I'm talking about making something much deeper than that. I'm talking about making sure every person who walks through the church doors know they matter. Hey everyone, welcome to Sped Serve Faith Education. I'm Connor, where we talk about disabilities, special education, Christian community, research, and building places where everyone belongs. If you're new here, as I said, my name's Connor. I'm hard of hearing. I wear a hearing aid. I've spent years volunteering in a church special needs ministry. That experience is one of the biggest reasons I want to dedicate my life to serving people with disabilities. It's why I'm pursuing special education. It's why I want to write books. It's why I hope to one day open a Christian school specifically designed for students with disabilities. So today's video isn't coming from someone who's trying to criticize churches just to complain. It's coming from someone who loves the church enough to believe we, as a people, as a community, can do better. Let's start with something simple. When people hear disability ministry, they often picture one classroom with children with disabilities go during Sunday school. That's certainly one form of disability ministry, don't get me wrong, but I think it's much bigger than that. A disability ministry is any intentional effort to make sure people with disabilities can fully participate in the life of the church. Notice I didn't say attend church, I said participate. There's a huge difference. Anyone can sit in a pew, but can they make friends? Can they worship? Can they understand the sermon that is being said? Can they join a Bible study? Can they volunteer? Can they serve? And can they become leaders in their community? Because if the answer is no, then they're present, but they aren't fully included. And I think that's something churches should care deeply about. Here's something I think we forget. Disability is one of the few communities that anyone can become a part of. You don't get to choose it. It doesn't care about your age, income, race, political party, or denomination. Anyone can become disabled tomorrow. Anyone can become hard of hearing, develop dementia later in life. Disability isn't someone else's issue. It's a human issue, which means it should also be a church issue. And when churches intentionally include people with disabilities, they aren't creating a special ministry. They're simply living out the gospel, what they preach. One of the few things I appreciate most about Christianity is that every human being has value because they are created in the image of God. That means our value isn't determined by how independent we are, how intelligent we are, whether we can speak clearly, I certainly can, or whether we need extra support. Every person has dignity. Every person deserves respect. and every person deserves the opportunity to know Christ and be a part of Christian communities. When Jesus met people who were blind, physically disabled, or otherwise marginalized, he didn't avoid them. He didn't even treat them like they were projects. He saw them as people. And I think churches should strive to do the same. Not because it's trendy, not because it looks good on social media, but because that's what love looks like. So if disability ministry is so important, why do so many churches still struggle with it? We'll answer that next. So, if disability ministry is such an important part of living out the gospel, why do many churches struggle with it? I honestly don't think it's because churches don't care. I think most churches genuinely want to help. The problem is that good intentions don't automatically create good ministry. I've met volunteers who desperately wanted to help, but were terrified of doing the wrong thing. I was there. I've seen churches with incredible hearts, but no training. I was there. I've heard people say things like, I'm afraid I'll say the wrong thing. I've never worked with someone who has autism before. What if I make things worse? Those fears are understandable. Again, I was there. But avoiding disability ministry because we're afraid isn't the answer. Learning is. Training is. Listening is. Every ministry in a church requires preparation. Children's ministry does. Youth ministry does. Security teams do. Worship teams do. So why should we expect disability ministry to be any different? The good news is this: you don't have to know everything. You just have to be willing to learn. Welcome is not the same as belonging. Here is a sentence that has stuck with me for years. Everyone is welcome. Almost every church says it. But there's another question we don't ask enough. Does everyone belong? Those aren't the same thing. A family can be welcomed at the front door and still leave feeling completely alone. Imagine you're deaf. The sermon isn't captioned, no interpreter, no one knows sign language. People smile at you, but nobody can communicate with you. Technically, you were welcomed, but not included. Or imagine you're a parent of a child with autism. Your child gets overwhelmed by loud music. People stare. Someone whispers, "Can't you control your kid?" Maybe nobody intended to be hurtful, but that family may never come back. Not because they weren't welcomed, but because they didn't feel like they belonged. Belonging takes intentional effort. This is one of the biggest misconceptions I see. Sometimes churches unintentionally treat disability ministry like a charity project. Now, don't misunderstand me. Helping people is biblical. Serving people is biblical. But there's a difference between serving someone and treating them like they're only there to be served. People with disabilities aren't ministry projects. They're members of the body of Christ. They're future volunteers, small group leaders, mentors, worship team members, teachers, deacons, friends. The goal isn't simply asking, how can we help them? It's also asking, how can they use their gifts to help us? Because every member of the church has something valuable to contribute. When people hear the word accessibility, they mean a ramp. And yes, those do matter, don't get me wrong. But accessibility is so much bigger. Accessibility can mean captions on your live stream, a hearing loop, an ASL interpreter, large print bulletins, visual schedules for children, sensory-friendly places, quiet rooms, flexible seating, clear communications, volunteers who can understand sensory envelope, parents who know they're supported instead of judged. Sometimes accessibility doesn't cost thousands of dollars. Sometimes it costs 5 minutes of planning. Sometimes it costs asking a family, how can we help your child succeed here? That conversation alone can completely change someone's experience. Serving in special needs ministry has changed. When I first started, I didn't know if I truly belonged there. There were so many different people that were different, all adults, mind you. And I'm a teenager. I started when I was in middle school. And I was working with people well into their 40s. I learned patience, flexibility. Everyone communicates differently. And success doesn't always look the way we expect. Sometimes success is making a new friend. Sometimes it's participating for 5 extra minutes. Sometimes it's simply feeling safe enough to come back next week. And honestly, these lessons have shaped the person I want to become. They've influenced why I want to study special education, why I want to write books, why I dream of opening a Christian school one day. Because disability ministry doesn't just change the people you're serving, it changes the people who serve. So what would happen if every church actually committed to becoming more accessible? Let's talk about what that could look like. Let's imagine something for a moment. Imagine a family walks into your church for the first time. Their son has autism. They're nervous, not because they don't believe in God, but because they've had bad experiences before. Most people that I know that used to be Christian and aren't was because they've met a bad experience with the church, with people. They're wondering, will people stare? Can someone tell us our child is being disruptive? Will we be asked to leave? Will anyone understand? Now imagine, instead that someone greets them and simply says, we're really glad you're here. A trained volunteer introduces himself. The family is shown a sensory-friendly space for anyone if they need it. The parents are asked, what helps your child feel comfortable? Nobody assumes, judges, or panics. They're simply welcomed with the dignity that they deserve. Now imagine another family, a teenager who's deaf. The sermon is captioned, an interpreter is available if needed. The youth pastor has already learned a few simple signs, like literally knowing Jesus, love, like all sorts of stuff can already help. The teenager isn't just watching church, they're participating in it. Imagine an adult with Down syndrome serving as a greeter. Someone who uses a wheelchair is teaching Sunday school. A member with cerebral palsy, speech impediment. You get what I'm saying. Reading scripture. That isn't lowering expectations, that's recognizing gifts. Because disabilities does not disqualify someone from serving Christ. I've shared this a little before, but I want to tell you why this topic matters so much to me. I'm hard of hearing. I wear a hearing aid. And for years I've volunteered in a church special needs class, ministry, whatever you want to call it. When I first started, I thought I was just volunteering. Looking back, God was changing my heart. Every week I learned something new. Not just about disability, but about patience, grace, celebrating the small victories. about seeing people for who they are instead of what they can or can't do. That experience changed my future. It's one of the few biggest reasons I want to study special ed. It's why I want to research disability and inclusion, and I want to publish books that help churches, schools, teachers, and families. And one day, as I've mentioned multiple times, is to open a school through faith, specifically designed for students with disabilities. Not because public schools are bad, not because other Christian schools don't care, but because I believe every student deserves a place where they're known, valued, challenged, and loved, where accommodations aren't an afterthought, where accessibility isn't optional, where faith and education work together to help students grow academically, socially, emotionally, and spiritually. That's the future I'm working towards. Before I end this video, I want to leave you with something practical. I call this the SPED Serve checklist. If you're a part of a church, ask yourself these questions. Can a deaf person fully participate in worship? Can someone who uses a wheelchair access every important part of the building? Do volunteers receive disability training? Do parents know who to ask if they need support? Is there a plan for children who experience sensory overload? Can adults with disabilities serve in meaningful ways? Does your church talk with disabled people or only about them? If you answered no to any of these questions, don't feel discouraged. Every church starts somewhere. The important thing is being willing to improve. I want to leave you with one final thought. Should our church start a disability ministry? I think that's the wrong question. Because every church already has a disability ministry. You may just not realize it yet. Maybe it's the older member who recently lost their hearing. Maybe it's the child who was diagnosed with autism this year. Maybe it's the teenager with ADHD who struggles to sit through youth group. Maybe it's the veteran with a TBI, traumatic brain injury. Maybe it's the grandmother beginning to experience dementia. Maybe it's someone who anxiously. Maybe it's someone with anxiety who quietly slips out before anyone notices. Disability isn't a niche issue. It's part of the human experience. If your church is around long enough, someone will need support. The question isn't whether disability ministry belongs in the church. The question is whether the church will be ready when the moment comes. Because the gospel isn't only about inviting people through the front doors. It's about making sure that people know they belong once they're inside. If that's the kind of church we become, then I think we'll look a little bit more like Jesus himself. If this video encouraged you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you're a pastor, what has your church done well? If you're a volunteer, what have you learned while serving? If you're a person with a disability or a family member, what made you feel welcome or unwelcome in a church? Or if you're someone who used to be Christian, tell me what drove you away. Let's have a respectful conversation in the comments. We can all learn from one another. And if you enjoy discussions about disability, special education, faith, research, and building stronger communities, consider subbing. It's free. My hope is that this channel doesn't just start conversations. I hope it helps create churches, schools, and communities where every person is seen as someone made in the image of God. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Connor. This is SPED Serve, where faith, disability, and inclusion come together. I'll see you in the next one. It was a pleasure to serve.